Yeah, so basically I run an ISP in Edinburgh, surprise, surprise. We have a Scottish network, but despite Fergus's best attempts, we don't have an internet exchange. So we sort of had this problem where, you know, we knew it was difficult. There had been failed attempts in the past. We knew it was possible, obviously. It's an easy thing to start. Let's start an internet exchange, we all thought. We got together with a few other stakeholders up in Edinburgh and said, well, you know, what can we do about this? And of course they said, well, we don't know. Refer to the guys who have done it before. So we spoke to, you know, Andy and Emma at Lonap. We spoke to, you know, a couple of other people. They said, from Keith, surprisingly, you know, so we spoke to Keith. We said, can we do an event at UKNOF event up in Edinburgh and, you know, maybe see if this is possible? And we were sort of going through this long process of trying to work out the best way about it. We didn't want another failure on our hands, so turns out that we needn't have worried, because one day I get a phone call from John Souter and he says, we're thinking of coming up to Edinburgh. So we thought, well, sod it, this is actually fine. You know, there's for and against reasons for having links to do it, but from what I'll explain, actually, I think what we've ended up with is going to be the best solution. So credit goes to Links. They organised a meeting. We had a meeting in March. Magic. It was organised by Links, the Scottish Government, and a couple of us sort of local ISPs. Links made it very, very clear, and again, credit to Links for this, they took absolutely nothing for granted. Wanted to make sure that nobody was going to force anything upon anybody, and equally to the Scottish Government's credit, they didn't want any involvement, they were just there to provide support, and that was really, really important. You can all go online. Excuse me. You can all go online. Help me out here. You can go online and you can look at. Come on. There we. This happened to me when I did a talk at the Edinburgh event too. I must have like a jinx against these things. PowerPoint is not my friend. So what I was trying to say was that you can go online and let me forget about this for a second. Yes, please. Anyway, there's a link to the there's a link to the agenda on Links's website, and actually just today there's videos of the whole thing posted, so you can read what everyone was going on about. I'll try and remember what my next slide was, but it was a rough agenda. Basically, we had a couple of people locally talking, myself included. We had a chap called Andrew who runs Extra Host up in Edinburgh. They have a fair amount of hosting up north, and we have a fair amount of access network. So we were sort of a couple of good people to bring along and talk about. We did have some speeches from the Scottish Government. There's a lot going on in Scotland with PSN, you know, building this network called Swan, and you know, there's people there who, that's it, Trudy, the girl from the Scottish Government, who explained to everyone what Scotland's ambition is, and it's pretty hefty. And show of hands, who hasn't heard John's patter on regional peering? Good, right, okay. So I won't go into that. John, of course, you know, doing his usual thing. And I spoke about the Scottish data centre scene, which has a lot more to it than you'd think. There is obviously the big one, Scolocate in Edinburgh, which has recently been purchased by Pulsant. But we also have a handful of other things. And something that's come out of this, again, is that, you know, Link's not taking anything for granted. If and when this happens, it wasn't necessarily taken for granted that Scolocate would be the venue for the initial pop. So the outcome of that was amazing. Everyone, you know, it was a huge turnout. We weren't expecting nearly as many people to come. But it was very positive. Everyone in the room was unanimously said, yes, please, John, we'd like an internet exchange. So the next steps from that is that Links have organised a meeting again in Edinburgh on the 13th of May. And the main reason I'm here speaking today is to try and organise as much support for that event as possible. We had a great turnout at the initial event, but the initial event was basically anyone who was at all interested in peering in Scotland, whether you were a company who quite liked the idea or had heard of it, government, all this sort of people. This event is very much going to be, going through the ins and outs and discussing how this exchange might take shape. And I encourage anyone who's even thinking about Scotland as a venue for bringing your network into, or any element of, I've got customers in Scotland, I've got an interest in Scotland for building a data centre because it's cold, whatever it might be, come and join this event. Anyone, you don't have to be a Links member to sign up. Go onto that link, it's on Links' website under events. Come along, it's in the centre of Edinburgh, so we'll all go for a drink afterwards. The unofficial feedback I got from speaking to the guys at Links after the event was that some interesting things. We're not necessarily going to use one of the old legacy Brocade switches, which is a surprise to me. Apparently, and you'll need to ask John about the ins and outs of this, but apparently the systems they use to manage different vendors are made much more complicated by adding Brocade in with Juniper and Extreme, so it'll probably end up being an Extreme switch that they put in. Links have this format of taking they've now built a prototype in Manchester, so other than getting an Extreme switch, probably we'll end up with that. And despite the openness to look at all the options, it's obviously going to be in Pulsant's data center, formerly Scolocate. So that's happening. There's a lot of support for it in Scotland. I'd very much like to encourage anyone from down south who hasn't thought about Scotland to put it in the back of their mind. And if you're at all open for a junket up to Edinburgh, come to the event. So we will have an exchange very soon. Hopefully, because it's got the Links badge on it, it will be a sustainable going concern, and lots of people should come and join it, and we'll hopefully peer with you soon. Any questions?
Andrew Brown from Browns. Is there any connection between what you're doing and the Pathfinder projects?
Yes, there's, well, not directly, no. This has very much been organised by the private sector. The public sector of things that are going on in Scotland are giant and cumbersome and all sorts of things. And there were questions asked at the event whether there should be a mandate to join, anyone who gets contracts on these sorts of Pathfinder or Swan or any of these types of things, whether they should be mandated to join the event, join the exchange. And at the event, it was made very clear that that is a bad idea. Scottish government, well, any government should be left, provide support, provide money for events, provide all the marketing and all the rest of it, but do not get involved. Leave it up to the guys that know what they're doing. So that was the outcome of that.
Hi, Andrew Maben from Tybus in Northern Ireland. So really interested, and congratulations getting so far with your initiative. Just a couple of questions. The Glasgow Edinburgh thing, did that cause a debate in terms of whether things should be?
Not at all. Glasgow doesn't really have a data centre that can take it. there is I have to say, the second most carrier neutral data centre in Scotland is in Glasgow, but it's by an order of magnitude less carrier neutral than, in terms of the number of carriers in the building, than Scolocate. Scolocate has, I think, 14 different fibre operators and 30 different people running a network over the top of that, providing access back to the rest of the country and abroad. IOMART's data centre in Glasgow, which we now have a pop in as well, has 4. So, we're very hopeful that this whole project will encourage people to come up to Scotland, and it will really open up the market. It's a great place for data centres to be. Like I said, it's cold, it's cheap power, all the good things, and there's good operators up there. And people are building data centres and all the rest of them. There's not enough of them that are carrier neutral, and that's why it was such an obvious choice to put it in Skolocate. We're very hopeful that it will encourage the market to grow, and that maybe one day we'll be talking about IX Scotland, which spans Edinburgh, Glasgow, because it's only a millisecond or two apart.
Yeah. Second question: you talk about some of us were interested in doing this thing. Was there already a formal group or an informal group, or was it just bunches of guys in the same industry?
Exactly. It was very much, anyone who knows me knows I'm an absolute latency snob, and so when I ping the guys in the rack next to me, it annoyed the hell out of me that it was going to London and back. And so I'd phone them up and say, can we run a cable across the room? And we did that with a couple of people. And it sort of started getting a little bit silly. And we weren't passing very much traffic, but I just wanted to do that for the sake of it. So, we were talking to all these people, and it never really took off to any formal extent. And that's when I was saying, we're having discussions with people, trying to get something off the ground in some formal capacity, and then John phones me.
It's John Suit again. I hope you don't mind me commenting on that. I think a crucial part of this is that it won't be sufficient just to build mechanical internet exchanges. It's not enough to just put switches in places. What needs to happen is that each of these exchanges needs to be nurtured by a local community. I think that's what we've learnt over the years. We wouldn't still be here, we wouldn't be as we were if we hadn't been nurtured by the industry over all that period. We've had our bad times, we've made mistakes, things have threatened us. All that stuff is going to happen to the local exchanges. And I think unless there's my acid test for whether we build more of these is there a local community of interest that really cares about this? So I know one of the reasons why Andrew asked that question is because he's wrestling with exactly that in Northern Ireland at the moment. And we hope that the primary result that will come out of what the similar event we held in Belfast a little while back is that it will bring that community into being in a more formal way. They don't have to form into a formal association or anything like that. The essential part of it, start having beers with each other and talk to each other more often. There are so many things that assail the industry. We heard a classic example of that this morning with the Communications Data Bill. Sorry to be a one-track record on that. But, that and a million other things that we report on all the time, that's enough in itself, it seems to me, for the industry to want to stay together and stick together and find common cause. And then on the other side of it, there's positive things as well. What we heard in Scotland was that there's a lot of concern about how things like rural broadband will really be achieved. There are clearly finite limits to what can be done from central funding through to build networks in countries. You end up with the sparsely populated bits saying, hey, how about us? There were people there already beginning to envisage new ways of doing things as a result of thinking, okay, there might be a nexus closer to us where actually we could interchange traffic, rather than thinking, God, we're a long way from London. So for me, the local community thing is absolutely key. It doesn't just act as a, will we be able to build an exchange that can ultimately stand on its feet, but it seems to me that it does something very positive for the network operator industry itself.
Andrew from Browns again. How will independence change what you're doing?
Hopefully not at all. Independence in Scotland's a dirty word at the moment, because you're sort of expecting to be glassed in the face one way or the other. This was one of the battling questions when we thought, is it appropriate that links get involved? And the answer to the question was the benefits far outweigh any concerns that anyone might have. I mean, the problem that Scotland has inherently is that we're tied to England by land and all sorts of other means. I mean, take BT, for example. BT's a company run from England. Our whole infrastructure in Scotland pretty much is based off, at some level, based on BT. We can't disconnect ourselves from that. We can't ask BT to cut its cut itself in half and split the network. Having links operating an internet exchange in Scotland is going to be the same thing. I mean, they're a professional organisation who know how to do this better than anyone else in the country, so why not have them run the network? And to try and bring politics into it at one level or another is kind of, you know, you can see where it crops up, but it doesn't actually come into it, or it shouldn't.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie.